Masechet Baba Batra Daf Tet Zayin. We are in the middle of a long commentary on Sefer Iyov. First, we're going to quote a bunch of Pisukim, and then we're going to add comments on it. We're in the context of when Iyov hears all the bad news that's happening to his family and his property, and so one messenger comes right after the other, and this messenger left, and another messenger comes and says fire came down from heaven and destroyed what you have, and then he leaves. And another one comes, and he said the Kasdim, the Babylonians, made 3 bands and they fell among the camels and they carried them away and so on. Another messenger comes just as that one leaves and says, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking in the house of the eldest brother, and a great wind came from the desert and it smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people there, on your children, and they all died. Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yishem Adonai Meborach, b'chol zot lo chata Iyov, v'lo natan tifla le'Elohim. And so Iyov tore his coat and shaved his head as morning practices, fell on the floor, and he said, I came out with nothing from my mother's womb, and I returned there with nothing, meaning everything that I have, Hashem gave me, so I never had it to begin with, so whatever I had for this, whatever time I did, and now Hashem took it away. May God be blessed, right? If you have, someone gives you a nice thing to use just for 1 week and takes it away, you don't complain, you say, oh, at least I had it for a week, and so he doesn't have less than he was born with. And so therefore he blesses Hashem, and even with all the suffering he got, he did not sin, and he did not lay reproach upon God. And so far the Satan is losing the bet. The Satan said that he is only faithful because you give him everything good, but if you give him some suffering, then he will not be faithful. And you see here, and he continues to be faithful even though he lost all of his property and his children. ויהי היום ויבוא בני האלוהים להתייסב וגומר ויאמר אדוני לשטן אמי זה תבוא ויען השטן את אדוני ויאמר משוט בארץ וגומר אמר לפניו ריבונו של עולם שטתי בכל עולם ולא מצאתי כעבדך אברהם שאמרת לו קום התהלך בארץ לאורכה ולרוחבה כי לך אתננה ובשעה שביקש לגבור שרה לא מצא מקום לקוברה ולא הרהר אחר מידותיך. We already saw Midrash just like this regarding chapter 1, but now we're applying it also to chapter 2, because in chapter 2 we have a very similar scene where all the divine beings, all the angels come and stand before God, and Hashem tells Satan, where are you coming from? And Hashem says, I have been going back and forth, walking around on the earth. Language that sounds familiar from Avraham, who also was told to walk this way and that way, and wherever he walks in the land, Ba'aretz in Eretz Yisrael, that will be acquired to him. And so what does that mean, that I was walking back and forth? So the Midrash fills in what the Satan was actually saying. He was saying, Master of the universe, I went all around the whole world and I haven't found anybody as faithful as your servant Avraham, because you told him, go and walk in the land according to its breadth and its width, and wherever you walk I will give to you. And yet when Sarah died, he had nowhere to bury her, and he had to go and buy this lot for a lot of money, and he did not criticize your ways. He didn't say, Hashem, you promised me so much. Look, I have to spend so much money just on a burial plot. Look how faithful he was. So that's how Satan opened this time again. In chapter 1, that's when they were first talking, and then Satan says, well, what about, Hashem says, what about Iyov? And the Satan says, well, just take stuff away from him. And so he did. He took his stuff away, his property, and his kids. But Iyov is faithful by the end of chapter 1. In chapter 2, now they meet again, and Satan's going to ask for more. Hashem says to the Satan, you think Abraham is so great? Have you seen Iyov? There's nobody like him. He is perfect, upright, fears God, turns from evil. He's even greater than Avraham. And look, you told me that I should cause him suffering, and I did cause him suffering. I let you do that, and yet he held fast to his integrity. And look, you made me cause him suffering for no reason, chinam. See, Satan, you were wrong. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ilmale mikra katub iyov shalom ro kadam shemesitin oto veniset. Rabbi Yochanan says this scene in the beginning of the second chapter of Iyov, if not that the Tanakh has it recorded, nobody would be able to say it, because it's so anthropomorphic and seems to put Hashem in a negative light. It's like a person who someone persuades him and he gets persuaded. People sometimes they get duped, right? A con man comes and persuades them that they should do something, and then they realize after, oh, this was a mistake. Can you say the same thing about Hashem? And yet that's what these Pesukim are saying, that the Satan came and he said, Hashem, you should give suffering to Iyov, and then that'll give him a test, then you'll know his true colors. But Satan was wrong, and Hashem allowed himself to be duped. And then now he's coming to Satan and say, oh, why'd you make me do that? Braita explains that this is the MO of the Satan. He goes down and misleads a person to sin, and then he goes up and angers God. Look what this terrible thing that guy did. Basically, he practices entrapment. And then he goes to God and gets permission to give the person punishment and kill the person. And he goes down and then kills the person. But the Satan is behind the whole cycle of sin and punishment to begin with. Vayana Satan et Adonai v'yomad or be'ad or v'chol asher la'ish yiten be'ad nafsho ulam shelachna yadecha v'ga el atzmo ve'el besaro ve'im lo al panecha yibarechecha. So now Satan says, listen, you only took away his property and his children, but you didn't affect him himself, right? Skin for skin, for all that a man has, he will give for his life. But put your hand on him now and touch his bone and his flesh, right? Give him a skin disease, make him suffer personally in his body, and you'll see he will curse you to your face. Hashem says, okay, you can touch his body, you can give him any disease you want, any kind of suffering, but you're not allowed to kill him. You have to keep him alive. And so Satan goes and he smites Iyov with sores from the foot to his head. ואמר רבי יצחק, קשה שערו של שטן יותר משל איוב. מה שלעבד שאמר לו רבו, שבור חבית ושמור את ינה. A great line. Rabbi Yitzchak says, the suffering of the Satan in this scene is greater than that of Iyov, because it's easy to make someone suffer and kill them, but to torture someone and keep them alive, that's a lot harder, right? When the Navy SEAL team says go and take them dead or alive, that's easy. They can take someone dead, but to go in and keep them alive while you're battling and all that, that's harder. And so this is a parable to a master tells a servant, break the barrel but save the wine. It's easy to break the barrel and destroy the wine, but how do you break the barrel and save the wine? That's so the mashal is the person's body. Iyov's body is the barrel, but his life is the wine. So how's he going to cause him terrible, terrible suffering? But you have to keep his vital signs alive. You can't attack his inner organs. And so to Satan, he just loves killing people. And so he's so tempted to, he's causing him suffering. He's so tempted to also kill him, but he had to hold back. So that was actually harder on the Satan than it was for Iyov. Amar Resh Lakish, hu Satan hu yetzer hara hu malach hamavet. Rambam likes this line, quotes it, that there's the Satan is the same as Yetzer hara, is the same as the angel of death. Hu Satan dichtiv vayaseh Satan me'et penei Adonai. Hu yetzer hara ketib hatam. Rak kol hayom uchtib hacha. רק אליו אל תשלח ידיך, הוא מלאך המוות הכתיב, אך את נפשו שמור על מה בדידי קיימה. Where do we see that Satan, a person's, the Satan who is an accuser up in heaven? Literally, Satan means an accuser. It's like the prosecutor, like the DA. The DA is not himself evil. It's actually good to have a district attorney to uphold the law and bring criminals to justice. So Satan is a proper servant of Hashem, and actually is one of the most important of the servants, and you need it to ensure justice and law and order. The problem is when Satan practices entrapment, and he undermines and tries to get people to sin, and then emphasizes their punishment. So that's the problem with Satan. And therefore, you see, it's the same as Yetzer Hara, as a person's evil inclination. It's pulling him to do things that are bad against his own interest. And is also the executioner, the angel of death, because by making the person sin, it brings them down and makes them guilty. So where do we see that they are the same? Because the words that they used to describe them are similar. Regarding Satan, it says Satan left from the presence of Hashem. And regarding Yetzer Hara, it says that Rak ra kol hayom. That's in Bereshit regarding the flood. It says Yetzer lev ha'adam, so that's talking about Yetzer Hara, rak ra, and it uses the word rak. And now back here in Iyov, we just proved that Iyov in the beginning is talking about Satan because it mentions Satan, and Hashem tells it to Satan, rak elav al tishlach yadecha. So use the word rak over here and rak over there, and therefore the Yetzer Hara is the same as the Satan here. Hu malachama v'tichtiv ach et nafsho shemor alma bedid. And Hashem then tells the Satan, you can make him suffer, but do not take his life. If Hashem is telling the Satan, don't take his life, it means that the Satan has the power, otherwise, to take people's lives. So you see, the Satan is the angel of death. And so all these three are really one and the same. Amar Rabbi Levi, Satanu pinina l'shem shamayim nitkavenu. Satan kevan techazia lakadosh baruch hu denatia da'ate batar Iyov amar chas v'shalom min she'ele l'rachamanu ted Abraham. Rabbi Levi says that the Satan and Penina, who both seem to be evil presences, but they acted l'shem shamayim. They're actually good. How do you see that? The Satan here in Iyov, because he saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was inclined to favor Iyov. Look how great Iyov is. So Satan was worried. He says, Chas v'shalom, maybe Hashem is going to forget the love of Avraham. And that's why Satan is trying to put down Iyov, not to be negative, but actually to be positive, to defend Avraham. That Hashem, Avraham is your favorite. He, you called him, right, such nice things and did such good things for him. Don't forget about Avraham. So really Satan was being good. Penina dichtiv v'chi asata rasarata gam ka'as babur ha're'ima derasha harav acha bar Yaakov bepapunya ata Satan nashke lechad'eh. Where do we see Penina? Well, that was the rival wife of Hannah, and she was provoking Hannah so much to make Hannah upset, so that then Hannah would have to pray and ask Hashem, please give me a child, and then ask Shemuel. And so Penina was provoking Hannah on purpose, as a good thing, right? To help her to be upset so much that she'll pray such a nice prayer, and then Shemuel will go ahead. So see what a nice co-wife Penina was. So this is a good excuse. Anytime two kids are fighting, I was making him suffer so that he would pray better. Okay. So anyway, Rav Acha bar Yaakov and Papunya gave this in a public lecture and said this derasha, and Satan came and kissed him on his feet. Says, thank you for defending me. Right? Somebody finally sees the good, even in the Satan. Bechol zot lo chatab Iyov bisfatav amar Rava. Bisfatav lo chatab libo chata. So even after all that, even after Hashem makes him suffer in his body still, he said, the pasuk says Iyov did not sin with his lips. Rava, so Peshat is he didn't sin. He didn't say anything negative against Hashem. But Rava says, with his lips he did not sin, but in his mind he did think blasphemous thoughts. What did he say? What did he think? My kamar, eres nitena biyad rasha mipene shofetea yechase imlo efo mihu. Amar Rava bikesh Iyov lafoch kara al piha. Amar labaye lo diber Iyov ela keneged hasatan. Look at this pasuk in chapter 9. Chapter 9 in Iyov is probably the closest that Iyov gets to cursing, to blasphemy. And there he says, the earth is given over into the hands of the wicked. Who's he? Covers the faces of its judges. If not he, then who? So Rava says the he in this pasuk is referring to Hashem, that the whole earth is given in the hands of the wicked, and he, Hashem, he's saying Hashem is wicked, covers the face of the judges, causes justice to stop. If not Hashem, who? Who else is more powerful? And so Rava says here, Iyov wanted to turn the bowl upside down, a way of saying that he wanted to kofer ba'ikar, to be heretical and say everything the opposite of what is true, and he only hinted to it. He didn't say it explicitly. He said, If not Hashem, then who? And he only said he, not right. He said me. Who else could it be? So he didn't say it explicitly, but in his thoughts, that's what he was thinking. But Abaye said no. When Iyov said this pasuk, the pronoun is referring to Satan. That the earth is given into the hands of the Satan. The Satan covers the face of the judges. If not Satan, then who? So he's blaming Satan, but not Hashem himself. Now you could say, why didn't Hashem control Satan? Okay, that's a good question. But he's not actually accusing Hashem, only accusing Satan, which is much, much better. And so Abaye thinks that Iyov did not curse Hashem, not even in his thoughts. כתנאה, ארץ ניתנה ביד רשע רבי אליעזר אומר, ביקש איוב להפוך כערל פיה, אמר לו רבי יהושע, לא דיבר איוב אלא כלפי שטן. And this machloket between Abaye and Rava is parallel to two opinions among the Tanaim. As it says in the Braita, the same pasuk, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Rabbi Eliezer said that Iyov, in saying this, wanted to turn the bowl upside down, turn everything upside down and say, Hashem is chas v'shalom, causing evil. Whereas Rabbi Yehoshua says, no, Iyov was referring to Satan. The Satan is causing evil in the world. He did not mean to accuse Hashem. Al da'atach ki lo ersha ve'en miyadecha masil. ואמר רבא, ביקש איוב לפתור את כל העולם כולו מן הדין. אמר לפניו, ריבונו של עולם, בראת השור פרסותיו סדוקות, בראת החמור פרסותיו קלוטות, בראת גן עדן, בראת גיהינם, בראת צדיקים, בראת רשעים, מי מעכב על ידיך? So another statement that Iyov says, although you know that I am not wicked, and there is none that can deliver out of your hand. Hashem, you know I didn't do anything wrong, and yet I can't get any deliverance here because you're in charge of everything. The cards are stacked against me. What can I do? It's like predetermined what I'm going to do and what the consequences will be. And Rava explains this pasuk as follows. Iyov wanted to make everyone in the world exempt from judgment. Nobody can be found guilty for their deeds. How so? He's laying out an idea of predeterminism. He says, Iyov said in this pasuk, Ribbono, Master of the universe, you created an ox with split hooves. That's a kosher animal. You also create a donkey with closed hooves, making it forbidden. You create everything and you create the opposite. You create Gan Eden, a place of reward. You create Gehinam, a place of punishment. You create Sadikim and you create Hashem. In other words, you create certain people with a predetermination that they will be good, and others with a predetermination that they will be bad. And you predetermine also the outcome, that one will go to heaven and one will go to Gehinam. Who can stop you? Nobody can stop you. That's what it means. En miyadecha masiel. And therefore, nobody, according to this logic, should be guilty for the actions that they do because Hashem created them that way and made them do the bad thing and then gives them punishment for forcing them to do that bad thing. And so if you follow this logic, since all actions are predetermined and whether someone is born good or evil is also predetermined, so therefore it's not the person's fault and the person should not be punished. This was, according to Rava, Iyov's claim. And so what was the friend's response to Iyov when he said that? The friend said, you do away with fear of heaven. You impaired devotion before God when you say that. Yes, it's true. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Yetzer Hara, and Yetzer Hara is very powerful and can get someone to do a sin, but it's not predetermined. Hashem also created Torah as an antidote. And if you learn Torah, that's more powerful and can put down the Yetzer Hara. And the person does have free will to decide if they're going to act badly or act well. And therefore, it is appropriate to give reward and punishment and have fear of God. What does this pasuk mean in Iyov? That the blessing of him that was lost came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. When did Iyov do these things? Birkat obed alai tabo, melamed sheha gozel sadeh mitomim mashbicha, umachazira lahen, velev almana arnin dechol hechadava ika almana dela avos nasebi la, hava azil shadeh shemeh ilave, vavu atu nasbi la. So the beginning of the pasuk refers to the fact that Iyov would go and steal fields from orphans, poor orphans, but he did it for their benefit. He would steal the land, improve it, right, grow things on it, and then return it to them, new and improved. So he actually did them a favor. And if he went and asked them, why didn't just ask them? They would say, no, we're good, but he forced his favors upon poor orphans. So he was actually a tzaddik. And how did he help widows sing for joy? That anytime there was a widow and nobody wanted to marry her, he would go and associate himself with her. He says, oh, this is my relative. And Iyov was a powerful, rich, important person. And so then everybody would say, oh, it's Iyov's relative. And they would immediately go and marry her. So you see what great things Iyov did. לו שקול ישקל כעסי ואהבתי במאזניים יישאו יחד. אמר רב, אפרה לפומד איוב חברותה כלפי שמיה. And Iyov said that my vexations were thoroughly weighed, my calamity laid in the balance. In other words, Iyov is saying, take all my evil deeds and I want you to weigh them against my sins. Even if I have a few small sins, but this suffering that you're giving me, Hashem, far outweighs any sins that I have. Basically saying, Hashem, your justice is unfair. And so Rav says that we should put dust in the mouth of Iyov, meaning he should be stuffed up. So not to say that. He shouldn't have said that. Can someone go turn to Shamayim as a friend? And you would a friend? You can accuse a friend and say, hey, you're not treating me well. I did this little thing, but look, now you're doing something much worse against me. And Iyov is being like so familiar with Hashem to say, oh, let's weigh our actions. What did I do to you? What did you do to me? לו יש בינינו מוכיח ישת ידו על שנינו. אמר רב אפרה לפומד איוב כלום יש עבד שמוכיח את רבו. Iyov said, if only there was an arbiter between us who may lay his hand upon both of us. Hashem, it's not fair. You are the judge, you're the witnesses, you're the executioner, and you're the other party. You're an interested party. Where can I find a third party to judge between the two of us? That will be a fair arbiter. And Rav says, dust should be placed in Iyov's mouth for saying that. Do you ever have a servant who rebukes his master? This is not respectful to speak to a master that way, and certainly not ריבונו של עולם. ברית קראתי לעיניי, מה אתבונן על בתולה? אמר רב אפרד לפומד איוב, איוב באחרניתה אברהם. אפילו בדידה לה הסתכל. דכתיב, תהנה נא ידעתי כי אישה יפת מראה את, מקלה דמקרה לה הווה ידע לה. And Iyov is saying how what a good person he is. And he says, I made a covenant with my eyes that I will not look upon a maiden. He never let his eyes veer and look in a negative way, licentiously at a maiden. So he says, look, Hashem, Iyov is saying, look what a tzaddik I am that I never did that. Rava says he should have dust in his mouth for saying that, because it's true, Iyov said, I didn't look at other women that way, but that means Iyov did look at his own wife in a lustful way. But Avraham, even for his own wife, he never looked at her, as it says, when they're going to Egypt, he says, oh, now I know what a beautiful woman you are. What does that mean? But before that, they didn't know. Only when they're going to Egypt, he had to look, because he knows that people in Egypt are going to look at her and take her. He had to say, oh, is my wife pretty? I wonder if I have to protect her. And then he looks, says, oh, yeah, she is pretty. But he never noticed how pretty she was before they went to Egypt. And so Abraham is even greater than Iyov was. Iyov is not so bad that he looked at his wife, but he's gloating like proud. Look, I never looked at another woman. Yeah, but you're not as good as Abraham, and so he shouldn't have said that. Kala anan vayelach ken yored sheol lo ya'ale. Amar Rav mikan shekavad Iyov betchiat hametim asher bisara yishufeni verba pesai chinam. Amar Rabba Iyov bisara cheref ubisara heshibuhu. Iyov said, as a cloud is consumed and vanishes away, so someone who goes down to the grave will come up no more. Just like a cloud, it's here and then it vanishes. The cloud's never going to be reconstituted. So too, Iyov says, someone who dies will never revive. And Rava says, from here we can see that Iyov denied resurrection of the dead, because that's it. So he said, when someone dies, then that's it. They're like a cloud that vanishes. They're not going to come back. Iyov said, Hashem, you crushed me with a tempest. You could interpret bis'ara as for a hair, you crushed me. But here we're taking it the same as a samech. You crushed me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. Hashem is not fair. Rabbah says there's midah keneged midah. Because Iyov blasphemed by mentioning a tempest, so too at the end of Iyov, Hashem appears to him in a tempest. Bisara cheref tichtiv, asher bisara yishufeni. Amar lefanav ribono sholam, shema roch se'ara abra lefanecha, v'nitchalef lecha ben Iyov le'oyeb. So where do we see that Iyov said something blasphemous with and mentioned the tempest? In this pasuk where he says, he crushes me with a tempest, Iyov said before Kadosh Baruch Hu, maybe there was a big tempest in front, there was a big storm in front of you, Hashem, and you got confused between Iyov and Oyeb. You just switched the order of the letters. My name is Iyov. Maybe you got confused, you were spinning around, a little vertigo, and you said, oh, that's Oyeb, that's enemy. You're treating me like an Oyeb, even though I didn't do anything wrong. So that's Iyov accuses Hashem of just making a mistake. בשרה השיבו דכתיב, ויען אדוני את איוב מן הסערה ויאמר וגומר אזונה כדגבר חלסיך שלך והודיעני. And Hashem comes and responds to Iyov out of a tempest, and he says, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man, for I will demand of you, and let me know your answer. And now Hashem is going to respond with a bunch of challenges against Iyov. And here they are. Amar lo, harbe nimin barati b'adam, v'chol nima v'nima barati la, guma b'fnei asma, shelo yehu shetayim yonekot miguma achat, she'elmale shetayim yonekot miguma achat, machshichot me'or einav shel adam. Ben guma leguma lo nitchalef li, ben Iyov le'oyev nitchalef li. Hashem says, I created many hairs in a person, and for every hair has its own follicle, so that you never have two hairs that grow from one follicle, because if two hairs would grow from one follicle, it would drain a person's energy so much that their vision would be impaired. So Hashem says, look how I never confused not even one follicle with another hair follicle. You think I would confuse Iyov and Oyeb? Look at how particular everything in nature is, every cell, everything that grows, right? Hashem is in charge and keeps track of. How dare you say that I got mixed up between the letters in Iyov and Oyeb? מי פילג לשטף תעלה וגומר, הרבה טיפין בראתי בעבים, וכל טיפה וטיפה בראתי לה דפוס בפני עצמה, כדי שלא יהיו שתי טיפין יוסעות מדפוס אחד, שמלא שתי טיפין יוסעות מדפוס אחד, משתתתות את הארץ והנה מוציאה פירות. בין טיפה לטיפה נתחלף לי, בין איוב לאויב נתחלף לי. And Hashem says, who has divided a channel for rain, or a path of light for the lightning of thunder? The Gemara explains, I created many drops of water in the clouds, and for every drop has its own channel. It is actually true that drops, they form in clouds, and they fall independently. They only join together when they come down on the ground. But each one is an independent drop. And so they don't come from the same channel. If two drops were to come from the same channel, then it would fall with such force that it would destroy the earth, and the earth would not make produce. So look how I distinguish every single drop that it should go in its own channel. And you think I would confuse Iyov with Oyeb? My mashma dahai te'ala lishna ditfus hi amar Rabba bar Shila dichtiv hayas te'ala kebet sa'atayim zera. By the way, where do we see that te'ala means a channel? Oh, it says when regarding Eliyahu Navi, he made a channel, it's called the te'ala, around the Mizbeach, as big as 2 se'av seeds. So we see that the word te'ala does mean channel. And the continuation of the pasuk, v'derech lachaziz kolot, harbe kolot barati ba'abim, v'chol kol v'kol barati lob shevil b'fnei asmo, kedei shelo yehu shete kolot yoseot mishebil echad, מלא שתי קולות יוסעות, מי שביל אחד מחריבין את כל העולם, בין כל לכל לא נתחלף לי, בין איוב לאויב נתחלף לי. The pasuk says, a path for lightning of thunder. So I created many thunderclaps in the clouds, and each one has its own path, so that no two thunderclaps come from the same path, because if they did, they'd be so loud it would destroy the world. So look how I distinguish between every single thunderclap. You think I would get confused between Iyov and Oyeb? הידעת עת לדת יעלה סלע חולל, איילות תשמור. יעלה זו אכזרית על בניה, בשעה שקוראת ללדת. עולה לראש ההר, כדי שיפול ממנה וימות, ואני מזמין לה נשר שמקבלו בכנפיו ומניחו לפניה. אלמלא מקדים רגע אחד, או מתאחר רגע אחד, מיד מת. בין רגע לרגע לא נתחלף לי, בין איוב לאויב נתחלף לי. פסוק goes on, says, do you know when the wild goats of the rock give birth? Do you know when the hinds calve? Now, why is that important? Hashem Midrash explains. that goats are cruel to their young. And when a mother goat has to give birth, she goes up to the top of a mountain so that when the fetus comes out, the baby comes out, it will fall down the mountain and die. But Hashem says, I bring an eagle just at the right time and saves the baby and places it before the mother in order to save its life and be taken care of. Now, if the eagle would come 1 second earlier or 1 second later, then it would not catch the baby and the baby would die. And so I do not mix up even 1 second to another. I'm so precise. You think I would not be precise and get confused between Iyov and Oyeb? How dare you, Iyov, say that I don't know what I'm doing and I just got confused. Cholel ayalo tishmor ayala zo rachmasar b'shah shekorat laledet ani mazmin la derakon shemakisha bebet harechem mitrapa mimoladeta vilmale makdim rega echad o meacher rega echad miyad meta ben rega lerega lo nitchalef li ben Iyov leOyeb nitchalef li. And the pasuk says, can you mark the when the hinds calve, the womb of deer is very narrow and very difficult to deliver. So you know what I do? Right when it's about to give birth, I bring a snake and the snake bites it at the opening of its womb, and then the womb becomes loose and she can give birth. And it has to be right at that moment. If it's a little earlier or a little late, then the deer would die. So you see, I don't confuse not even 1 second with the next. And are you accusing me that I would confuse Iyov with Oyev? Hashem says, I don't make mistakes. I am precise. And you just look around at nature and see how exacting and how precise everything is in nature. And so Iyov blasphemed by saying, oh Hashem, you mixed things up. You got the wrong number. They got the wrong email address, and you sent these punishments because Hashem, you were confused. Hashem says, I am not confused. Iyov lo beda'at yedaberu dvarav lo behaskel uchtiv ki lo dibartem elai nechona ki abdi Iyov. Now we have a contradiction between two pesukim. On the one hand, it says Hashem has spoken without knowledge, his words were without wisdom, meaning Iyov was totally wrong and not wise. But yet there's another pasuk all the way at the end that says, Hashem tells the friends of Iyov, you have not spoken of me what is right, like my servant Iyov. Iyov was right and you guys were wrong. So which one is it? Rava says, we learn from here that a person cannot be held responsible for what he says while he's in distress. What Iyov said was wrong, and Rava is the one that said above that he blasphemed. And yet, even though he said wrong things, nevertheless Hashem said, leave him alone, right? Don't accuse him. He is in distress. He had a terrible suffering come upon him, and so we give him a pass, and we don't bring the gauntlet down on him and judge him for saying these negative things while he's suffering. וישמעו שלושת רעי איוב את כל הרעה הזאת, הבא עליו ויבוא איש ממקומו, אליפז תימני בדד השוחי וסופר נמתי ויוודאו יחדיו לבוא לנוד לו, ונחמו מי ויוועדו יחדיו. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, למד שנכנסו כולן בשער אחד, ותנה בין כל אחד ואחד 300 פרסה. Pasuk says that Iyov's friends heard of all the terrible things that came upon him, and they each came from their own place. Their three names were Eliphaz and Bildad and Sophar, and they joined together in order to mourn with him and comfort him. So why does it say vayiva'adu yachdav, as if they made an appointment and they came together? Rav teaches that they all entered into one gate. They all got to Iyov's city exactly at the same time, even though in a Braita says they lived 300 parsangs between each and every one of them. They lived very far from each other, and yet they all managed to arrive at exactly the same time. Minahavu yadu. Now, how did they know that Iyov had all this suffering happen upon him? Ikadamre kilila hava lehu, vikadamre ilane havu lehu, v'chavan de chamshi havu yad'i. Amarava hanu damari inashe, o chabra kachabre Iyov, o mituta. So how did they know? Two answers. One is they each had a crown, and the crown would have some sign. If something would happen to one of them, then these magical crowns would light up, and they say, oh, your friend's in trouble, and they would immediately go. Another opinion says they each had these special trees, and the trees, as soon as it would wither, that was a sign that one of your friends is in distress, and that's how they knew, and they came to comfort him. And that's why people say either a person has friends like Iyov or death. A person needs some close friends, that people that will come to your rescue and they be there for you and comfort you no matter what, even if they live far away. Rabbi Yochanan amar Ribiya ba'ala olam, Resh Lakish amar Meriba ba'ala olam. Amar le Resh Lakish Rabbi Yochanan lidachta amat Ribiya ba'ala olam, mipnei ma lo nichpelu benotav shel Iyov. Now we go and record a pasuk from Bereshit chapter 6, but it's going to relate to Iyov. Over there it says that when the people multiplied on the earth and they had many daughters. So what does it mean that they had many daughters? Was that good or bad? Rabbi Yochanan says it was good. That means they would have had a lot of propagation. A lot of girls, they could have a lot of babies. And so the population increased. And Resh Lakish said that Mediba, that fighting came upon the world because there were these beautiful daughters. So then all the men, especially the important men, the Bnei Elohim, in that pasuk, they were fighting over them, and this was a negative thing. And so Resh Lakish told Rabbi Yochanan, according to you, you say that having daughters is a good thing, and that has a lot of propagation. The Peru Urvu, it's a wonderful thing. If it's so good to have daughters, then how come Iyov at the end of his life Iyov got back double everything he had, all the property and animals that he had. At the end of his life, he got rewarded with double what he had at first. However, the number of daughters he had was the same. So if having daughters is good, then how come he didn't get double the amount of daughters? Amar lo nihidela nichpelu b'shemot aval nichpelu b'yofi dichtiv vahi lo shib'ana banim v'shalosh banot vayikra Hashem achat yemima v'shem hashenit kesi'ah v'shem hashelishit keren apuch. And Rabbi Yochanan says, you're right, he didn't have double the number of daughters in name, meaning not in number, but even though there were the same number of daughters, they were twice as beautiful. How do you know? Because it says he had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And look at their names. Their names indicate how beautiful they were. Yemima and Kesiah and Keren Hapuch. What do these names mean? Yemima sheta doma layom. Yemima, she was as beautiful as a daytime. Kesiah shayarecha nodef ke Kesiah. Kesiah, that she smelled so nice, like a cassia tree. Here's a cassia tree over here. Keren hapuch amri debe rebi shela. Shudoma lekarna de keresh. Ked de keres. Some say she was similar to a horn of a keres animal that are very beautiful. Some say keres is a rhinoceros. I don't know how beautiful that is, but anyway, she was that beautiful. And so in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they laughed at this answer. And so having a horn is a blemish. This is not a nice thing to say, oh, you look just like a horn. Ela amar Rav Chisda kechur kema derishka beminesh nemar ki tikrei bapuch. Rather, Rav Chisda says that she was as beautiful as the nicest garden saffron. Here's a garden saffron. That's very beautiful. As the pasuk says, even though you enlarge your eyes with paint, puch. So you see, puch is something as a makeup that people use to beautify themselves. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi it yelida le berata. Haba ka halash da'ate. Amar le abu. Ribiya ba'ala olam. So one time, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi, had a daughter, and he was very upset. He wanted a son, and so he was so upset, and his father said, oh no, don't be upset. Propagation has come to the world. You had a daughter. She will have many children. This is a beautiful thing. It's a great blessing. Amar lebar kaparat hanchumin shel hebel nichamcha abuch. But Bar Kaparat told Rabbi Shimon, your father's consolation is nonsense. It's not true. It's better to have a son. Detanya. Iyov shalolam belo zecharim belo nekebot. Ash'ela shrem lemi shebanav zecharim oy lo lemi shebanav nekebot. Iyov shalolam belo basam belo bursiki. Ashre mi she'umanato busmi ve'oy lemi she'munato bursi. As the Baraita says, it's impossible in the world not to have some males and some females. But, so some people have to have boys, sometimes some people have to have girls. But, blessed is the one who has a boy, and woe to the person who has a girl. Unfortunately, this was the reality back then, that if someone has a boy, that's their future, that's their retirement policy. You have a boy, they come, they grow up, they work on the land, and they provide for their parents. Whereas when someone had a girl, then they would have to come up with a dowry, sometimes a large amount, to get them married off, so someone else will take her to their field, and so they have to invest a lot of money into raising a girl and getting her married, and then that's it. They're gone, and there's no future. There's no retirement policy for the parents. So that was the economic system. That's just the way things were. So it was a lot luckier to be the one to have the boys and not the girls, even though of course the world needs both of them. And similarly, the world needs perfumers and tanners. Perfumers, the guy smells good all day. He's working with perfume. Tanners, very smelly, but we need leather goods. So blessed is the one who can be a perfumer, and woe is the one who has occupation as a tanner. You need both, but lucky to be the good one. Ketanae. Vadonai berach et Abraham bakol. Mai bakol. Rabbi Meir omer shelo hayta lo bat. Rabbi Yehuda omer shehayta lo bat. Acherim omrim bat hayta lo l'Abraham ubakol shema. This disagreement about whether it's good or bad to have a girl is paralleled in the following baraita among Tanaim. When it says Hashem blessed Avraham with kol, with everything. What does it mean with everything? Rabbi Meir said his great blessing was that he didn't have a daughter, he only had sons, so he thinks that it's bad to have a girl. Rabbi Yehuda says no, he blessed with everything means that he had a daughter. That's a great blessing to have a daughter. And others say that he had a daughter, her name was Bakol. That would also mean it's a good thing. Hashem blessed Abraham with a daughter named Bakol. Rabbi Elazar Modai Omer, Istagninut hayta belibo shel Abraham Abinu, shekom alchem mizrach ma'arav mashkimin lefitcho. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Eben Toba hayta tiluya besavaro shel Abraham Abinu, shekol choler sher haro'eh oto miyad mitrapeh, b'shah sheniftar Abraham Abinu min ha'olam tila HaKadosh Baruch Hu begalgal hachama. Amar Abaye, haynu da'amare inashe, idle yoma, idle kesira. Other opinions about what Bakol means is that Abraham, he was knowledgeable in astrology, and he was so famous that Bakol means all the kings of the east and the west would come early to his doorstep to ask him questions. Hey, can you please look at the stars and tell us, is this going to happen or is that going to happen? Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says that Avraham had this precious jewel that he was hung around his neck, and any sick person would just look at it, they would immediately get better. So that's what it means by kol. He had this all-powerful healing stone. And when Avraham died, Hashem took that and he hung it on the sun. And that's why Abaye says that's what people say, as the day progresses, sickness is lifted. If you go out and get some sunshine, that's very good and healing, because that stone is up there hanging on the sun. Another opinion. What does it mean that Hashem was blessed with everything? That Esav, Abraham's grandson, did not rebel in his own lifetime. Abraham, by the time Abraham died, Esav was still good, and he didn't have to suffer to see his grandson go in evil ways. Or another opinion, that his own son, Yishmael, even though he went awry in Abraham's lifetime, Abraham had to kick him out of the house, but Yishmael made teshuvah in his own life. How do we see each of these opinions? Esav min hasadeh v'hu ayef. Tana, oto hayom niftar Abraham Abinu. V'asa Yaakov Abinu tevshil shel adashim lenachem et Yitzchak aviv. How do we know? It's because it says Esav came from the field and he was tired. We're going to see in a second, means that he was tired from sinning. And that's also the day that he gave up his birthright. And the Baraita says that was also the day that Avraham died. And that's why Yaakov was making lentil soup, because when people eat lentils when they are in mourning, he was making it to comfort Yitzchak, his father, whose father, Abraham, just died. So you see, Abraham died right before Esav went on the wrong path. How come we serve lentils to mourners? So in the West, they say in the name of Rabba Bar Mari that just like a lentil has no mouth, has no opening, it's perfectly round, so too someone in mourning has no mouth, has no words, can't express the sorrow that they are in. Davar acher, ma adasha zo מגולגלת, אף אבלות מגלגלת ומחזרת על באי העולם. מה בנהו יקבנהו לנחומה בבאי. Another opinion is that just like a lentil is round, and so too, mourning, what goes around comes around, right? This happens. People have good times and bad times. People die. People will be in mourning. It's a kind of a comfort, right? That this is what happens, and it's the way of the world. Now, what's the difference between these two opinions? The question is, can you use an egg? Well, an egg has no opening, has no mouth, and so the first opinion would apply to an egg as well. But an egg is not really perfectly round, and therefore the second opinion would not apply as well to an egg. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chamesh avirot abar oto rasha beoto hayom. Rabbi Yochanan says that Esav committed 5 transgressions on that day when he gave away the birthright. Ba'al na'aram orasav, haraget hanefesh, v'kafar berikav v'chafar. He raped a betrothed woman, and he killed a person, and he also denied God's existence, and he denied resurrection of the dead, and he despised the birthright. Where do we see each of these things? That he had relations with a married, engaged woman. We see it says here he came from the field, and it says in Devarim, if a man and woman are found in a field, and she is an engaged woman. So you see, he says the field here and there. How do we know that he killed person? A person also gives a rashava. Says here he was tired when he came from, he was faint, and this also says in Miyah, woe is me, for my soul faints because of all the murderers. Li uchtivatam ze Eli ve'anvehu. Esav said, "Why? What prophet is this to me? Ze Eli," and that is a play on words of Ze Eli. This is my God, and I will glorify Him. Esav says, "Lama Ze Eli? What do I need Ze Eli for?" That's where you see he denied God. Ve'chavar b'tchiat hametim dichtib. Hinei anochi holech lamut. Ve'shat ha'bechora dichtib. V'hi bez Esav et ha'bechora. He denied resurrection of the dead because it says, "I'm going to die," and he meant, "I'm going to die permanently. What do I care what happens in the future?" He didn't think he's going to have any future even after death. And he despised the firstborn. That's it says explicitly. He despised the firstborn right. ושעשה ישמעאל תשבע בימיו מנלן כי הדרבינה ורב חמה בר בוזי הבו יתבי קמא דרבה וקם מנמנם רבה אמר לרבינה לרב חמה בר בוזי ודאי דאמריתו כל מיתה שיש בה גביעה זו היא מיתתן של צדיקים אמר לאין והדור המבול אמר לאן הגביעה והאסיפה קמנינן. Where do we see that Ishmael made teshuvah still during the lifetime of Avraham? Because we have a following story about Ravina and Rav Chama Bar Buzi. They were 2 colleagues, and they were sitting before their teacher, Rava. And Rava, their teacher, was falling asleep. In the meantime, the 2 students are speaking to each other. And Ravina asks Rav Chama Bar Buzi, "Is it true that you said that anywhere in Tanakh where it says someone dies, and it says the word vayigva, that means that person died as a righteous person?" And Ravina said, and Rav Chama said, "Yes, I did say that." Ravina asks, "Hold on, the generation of the flood says vayigva, all the people died in the flood, but they were not righteous." Amar le'anan givia va'asifa kamrinan. And Rav Chama Bar Buzi says, "No, what I meant is when it says vayigva vayamot vayasif elamav, that he was gathered unto his people." When it says that in the Torah, it usually means literally the way they would bury a person back in biblical times is they would put them in a family cave and put the body out like on a shelf and come back a year later and gather the bones and put them in a little jar and put the jar next to the other forefathers that are there. So it's literally gathered unto their fathers. So when it says that someone vayigva, that they expired and were gathered unto the fathers, that's a statement that means they were properly buried next to their fathers, they went in line with their fathers, and that means that they died righteous. V'ha'Yishmael dichti be'gevi avasifa. And now Ravina asks, hold on, Yishmael, he was wicked, and yet it says regarding him, vayigva, vayamot, vaye'asif el hamav. So how could that be? Adehachi itar behu Rava amar lehu dardeke hachi amar biyochanan Yishmael asa teshuvah b'chayav yishnemar vayikviru oto Yitzchak v'Yishmael banav. So meanwhile, Rava woke up. He was napping the whole time, but he was napping. Us people are napping, but they're still listening. So he was still listening and processing, and so he wakes up and says, right, my children, my students, Rabbi Yochanan said that Ishmael made teshuvah during his father's lifetime. It's true, Ishmael went off the path, but then he made teshuvah, and he was worthy of getting a proper burial. And to say, Vayasif el amav. Where do we say they made teshuvah? Because the pasuk says that when Abraham died, Yitzchak and Yishmael buried him. Look how it says Yitzchak first, which means Yishmael accepted the authority of Yitzchak and said, Yitzchak, show me the way. I want to make teshuvah, and accepted his authority. Hold on. Maybe the pasuk is just listing them in order of their wisdom, and Yitzchak was wiser, and that's why I put Yitzchak first and then Yishmael, but maybe not because Yishmael made teshuvah. Hold on, if that's the style of the Torah, then how come it says that Esav and Yaakov buried their father Yitzchak? It should say, if it's an order of wisdom, it should say Yaakov and then Esav. Therefore, you see that the Torah doesn't list people just in the order, but rather when it lists Yitzchak first and then Ishmael, that is because Ishmael said, Yitzchak, you can go first. And since he says you can go first, that means Ishmael recognized Yitzchak as the leader and learned from him. And we see from here that Ishmael made teshuvah before Avraham died, and that was the final answer of why it says Avraham was blessed. Bakol, what's greater than Bakol to know that all your children are righteous, and even one that went off the path for a while, then came back, and at his death, both of his sons were there to bury him, and both were righteous. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.